doodle, relax. I thought Friday afternoon,
Okay.
that sounded kind of nice, you know?
Yes.
So my thought was I was just going to start with just showing you just a couple little kind of techniques to consider with the watercolor, things you could do, but keep in mind this is all just very exploratory. And then as far as like adding like additional medium for like doodling, you certainly can just doodle with just your watercolor and like little skinny brushes, and I'll even show you some little techniques for that. But some other things, like I have just this like little pencil case here with some just different micron pens, which are black. I have black only, but they do come in other colors. But they have different sizes. So you can get like a thicker line, a really skinny line. And then I've got like some white gel pens and some like white markers. Some work better than others, but you know, I just kind of keep like a little box of things I could doodle with, you know, that I pull out. And I like, you can doodle with Sharpies, you can doodle with a Crayola marker, you could doodle with an ink pen. It really doesn't matter what you bring back in on top of it. I just like the micron because it's it won't smudge. Like if I put water back over top of the micron, it won't bleed, it'll stay. So that's why I like it with the watercolor. I mean, that's really the only reason, is you just get skinny lines and it doesn't bleed. So I think that's kind of nice. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my camera. Let's see, there we go. So I just have like a pan watercolor set here. Tubes work great. And then I have this little, it's like a little travel watercolor set. I found this on Amazon and I love it. The colors are gorgeous. It was not very expensive at all. It was pretty cheap. I can link it too.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, so this little guy is really nice. It's got like the little pad you can dry off on. It does come with a water brush too. You know, so you don't have to use them, but the colors, I'll just kind of show you. I did a couple just before class because I hadn't really played with it too much, but these little swatches here are all from this palette.
Oh, nice.
I mean, the colors are pretty nice. That's from something different, but you know, I'll sometimes just kind of play around in like separate notebooks sometimes. But just a couple things I want to show you, and for some of you this may be review, but just things to consider. So the doodling will pretty much come second because we want to do all our wet media first and we want to let that dry, and then we can kind of doodle on top to add like finishing touches. So sometimes I'll do this like all in one sitting. Sometimes I'll do like watercolor and then come back a second day. It just kind of depends how much time you have and what you want to put into it. But you know, everything's just very loose and relaxed. But I just want to show you a couple techniques that you can do with your watercolor to get different effects that will look really cool with these kind of floral doodles. So the first is wet on wet, which I know some of you already know this, but just to kind of review, all you'll do is just take water and paint it on your paper. Now I am using a flat brush and painting my water in like a controlled strip. Oh, also, the other thing too is if you want to hit, I forgot to mention this, but if you want to mute yourself as well and then just pop in if you have a question anytime, just for background noise and everything.
Okay.
Perfect. So, yep, I'm just painting like a little strip like this. Then I can get some extra water on my brush, pick, you know, any color I want, and then I can just sort of drop that into this area. And it's going to stay within this controlled area. The watercolor is not going to really leave that unless I put tons and tons of water on it, but I'm not putting too much water in. And you can, what I'll try to do is just choose colors that will blend nicely together, like a blue and a purple, or like reds, oranges, yellows, you know, just pick colors that sort of work well together. And this is going to just create a really natural kind of soft look. And I'll just show you, here's a dried example of the wet on wet. So I just did some like kind of different blues and greens. You can almost get like a kind of tie-dye effect. as always, I've mentioned this before in classes, but if you ever have too much water on your paper with watercolor, just take some paper towel and you can just gently blot and it'll lift most of that back up while it's still wet. So that's something you can do. You can also layer these, let them dry and layer more color on top and do all sorts of things with the wet on wet. Okay, that's a good way to get multiple colors going together. I did use a flat brush here, and I want to mention I like to use a round brush to get more circular shapes. So brush shape comes into play kind of when we're doodling, because you want to think about what shape are you trying to create. So if I want to create circles, I'll use more of a round brush, or maybe like a bright, just something that's going to allow me to paint more of that circular shape. And then I kind of stick with my flats to get more of the rectangles, or like what I did here, these little squares. I'll just use a flat brush for those. So consider different paint brushes too, as I'm showing you some of these little techniques, because different brushes will achieve different looks for you as well. And then the last two things I really want to mention, in addition to wet on wet, we have wet on dry. So I'm going to just paint a strip of watercolor here a minute, and I'll just need to let this dry. But keep in mind, wet on dry is going to produce a different effect. So if I paint this and let this dry, I'll show you here. I've got some dried examples. Okay, so I painted the green strip, much like I painted this purple strip here. And then I just layered other washes of color on top when it's dry. And notice how crisp of a line I get. It doesn't blend. It mixes in a very different way and creates a very different effect. So just consider, like, what effect do you want to achieve? So, you know, that's basically why I'm showing you these, is just so you know, do you need to let it dry? Do you want to work wet on wet? What are you trying to achieve? And then the last effect, you can actually, this is a pretty decent example with how it's dried, but this is glazing. So glazing it doesn't have to be done in a circle. I just happen to do an example in a circle, but it could be done with a flat brush as well. But the whole point of glazing is layering colors on top of each other to create new colors and new layers. And you sort of start to get all these different kind of fun little edges that happen as the paint starts to dry. So how you glaze is you just pick any color you want to begin with, any color, and you just paint it down and you let it dry. And then after this little swatch is dry, I take a wash of another color, and it could be any color I choose. It could be orange, it could be purple, it could be magenta, it could be whatever color I think would look kind of nice over top of it. And then each layer, you just add more water to it. So it becomes more transparent with each layer that you build over top of this. So again, this is just that dry example, so you can start to see kind of the layering. And then here, just showing you to, you know, consider like your shapes that you're making for what you want to put inside. If you want to do kind of more round or kind of focusing on this shape, you could consider that. But, you know, maybe you want something like this, right? Where it's kind of like a box shape, filling that in. These are just some other doodles, but, you know, consider shape as well. Sometimes if I'm doing like a longer kind of like a floral going upward, I might do kind of like a shape like this and just kind of let it dry and then doodle over top of it. And then, you know, you can play around with those washes during this time too. You can kind of play with the wet and wet. You can play with some mixing. You can, you know, blend colors together. So what I'll often do is just kind of experiment with some colors, but just kind of consider the basic shape of what I want to do. And then if I want to do something kind of viney or something with some leaves coming off, it kind of works well with this shape. Whereas sometimes it's fun to do something more like this, where you're almost doing a loose painting of the flower underneath. So it's a different effect. So that might be taking more of like a round paintbrush and doing something like, just grab a little bit of color, just doing some kind of loose, very loose, almost like you're painting a very loose flower, something like that. Sometimes I might do some like little random shapes too that I could then doodle inside. You know, sometimes it might be like a little series of dots, and then I add kind of some detailing inside. Oops, make sure you can see that. So you can, you know, there's different approaches depending on like what you want to do. You could even do like a background and then do the same kind of idea where we then layer color and then doodle on top as well. So you can kind of layer, you can build. Sometimes I'll even, like, if you want to do like some leaves in there too, you can even kind of bring some like loose green kind of shapes. You could almost do like a vine kind of shape. You could even have some like little leaves kind of coming up. You could also even just bring in some other colors into the mix too. Again, kind of playing with that wet on wet a little bit. And then again, it's kind of letting some of this dry. And then what I'll do is I'll use some of these as my examples to show you how we can add some doodling. And then we can kind of do like a full page together as well. Let's see. You could also, this is kind of fun too, just kind of taking different splashes of colors and sort of placing them near each other. And then kind of doodling different flowers on top and kind of connecting them. So sometimes I'll just even do very random versus kind of a loose floral shape. And then now that this area for my glazing is dry, I'm just gonna zoom in a minute and just show you glazing real quick, just so you can see this. So this is just one single color right now, okay? So I'm taking a brush with lots of water and I'm just gonna do like a magenta, lots of water. And what I do is I'm gonna do a wash of magenta over top of this whole thing and let it dry. Once it dries, you can see like the effect of the glazing. You really can't see it until it dries. Then you can keep layering and keep glazing. And then you can kind of get those fun little rings around it by letting it overlap a little. Sometimes I'll purposefully, like I can glaze on this one too, just to kind of show you something different. Sometimes, you know, I might purposely like glaze off to the side a little bit to kind of create like a layered effect or something a little bit different to kind of see, you know, some of that interaction. So you can play with that. And then, let's see, I'll just show you over here too real quick, and then we can start like a final one together. So this is the wet paint on dry paint. So this is dry, completely dry. So now I'm taking just some wet blue watercolor, and just to show you, if I paint over top of this, right, I get that crisp line. So I can paint shapes within shapes now if I want to. I can layer up my paint if I want to. You know, whatever you want to do during this kind of stage to just create kind of a colorful, fun background. And you could even do kind of a fun combination where you have some circles and squares, but then some loose, more organic shapes. It's really kind of whatever appeals to you. But I'm gonna go ahead and just let that dry. And then I'll come in, I'm gonna bring in some paper here. And I'm going to, for mine, just do something, I'm gonna just kind of do some loose kind of shapes in the background. They're not gonna be super perfect, but they're not going to be super, super loose at first either. I might do a little something like this where I paint some loose shapes in, but I'm going to start off by kind of blocking out some shapes to make myself a composition. So that's what I like to think about, even if I'm kind of doodling, is how might I want to lay out my page? Because even if this isn't going to be something I tear out and frame, you know, it still sometimes is nice to have something a little bit semi-polished in your sketchbook as well. So I'm going to stick with my flat paintbrush for now. So I've got like my little flat paintbrush. This is a size 12. I like this one a lot. This one I use a lot with watercolor. It's really nice. And then what I like to do is kind of think about a color scheme. You know, not that you have to be like plan everything out ahead of time, but you know, when you're looking at your full color palette, do you want to use every single color, or do you want to pick like a few colors that you think complement each other well? Like I've done it before where I've done like all warms, all cools. You know, I'll do like a split complementary, meaning I might do like kind of this green with like a magenta and then like a red orange or something like that. So, you know, whatever color scheme sort of appeals to you. I think I'm going to start off with some blues today. And I'm going to just get my brush wet. And I'm just going to actually start kind of in the middle. I'm going to just make myself a little rectangle. This is sometimes how I like to start things. So I like to give you guys two different strategies for like laying out compositions. And, you know, I've done it before, like when you're hanging artwork on the wall where I've planned it all out. And then I've done it before where I just pick one piece and then start building around it. And more often than not, I enjoy the process when I start with something and then build from that something. That's just kind of enjoyable for me. But if you would like to be more thoughtful in your plan, absolutely go for it. So I'm just gonna keep my shapes kind of loose. I'm gonna play around with some different blues, maybe like mix a little bit of green into those blues. And I'm just gonna do some different kind of shapes. And I'm just going to sort of start to fill in the space. It doesn't have to be super grid-like or perfect, but I'm envisioning just different florals kind of going in different ways. So you can lay out your page however you feel like, whatever like looks good to you, totally will work. Move my water over. To me, this is the type of painting I can do if I'm watching a show or a movie, or I like to just like put on music, you know, or even, you know, with a group of friends, or, you know, this is just kind of a fun thing I think to do together. You know, you could put some kind of circles in there too if you want to play with some other shapes. You could try some glazing effects. Bring this out just a little bit more. But this is kind of, you know, the fun part is just putting in these different little areas of color. You know, if you want to do some kind of leaf patterns, you could bring some green into it, even if you've got some other colors. Sometimes it's fun to kind of start with one color and then like build it out as you go. Take a strip of purple up here. And I personally just kind of let my lines be a little loose, a little whimsical. I don't worry about it being too perfect. And I do want to mention, you can do this same process with gouache. And gouache is going to give you beautifully like matte dried squares. You could do this with acrylic. You just need to water down your acrylic about 25 to 30%. You can do a very similar thing. This is a fun way to make just like little greeting cards. Just really anything. I'm actually starting to expand my color palette more than I thought I was going to, but it's kind of fun. You know, and that's why I like to don't necessarily start off with too much of a plan, but just kind of pick some loose colors. Another thing that can be really helpful with composition is if you use a color one place, use it at least one more time. So like I've got a little bit of purple up here. I'm going to bring a little purple elsewhere. And again, you can try different brushes if you want more of a rounder shape. You can grab a round paintbrush. You know, you could use washi tape and like make yourself a little grid and paint in your squares if you want it to be more grid-like or line up in a certain way. But like I said, I'm allowing mine to just be very kind of loose and whimsical. So just a little bit more. You know, keep in mind if there's a shape that you didn't like quite how it dried, like this one, I just feel like it should come out a little bit more. I can just pull it out. Yeah, just kind of take a look around and say, you know, what could I repeat? Or perhaps, you know, there's another color I want to add in. I didn't really do any wet on mine, but I'm going to do just a little bit of glazing up here. Just going to bring a little glazing into mine. Because I use lots of different colors. So sometimes when you use lots of colors, it's fun to glaze some of the other colors into each other. Just it, you know, it brings a little bit of unity. But again, that's optional. You don't have to do that. Just something I'm choosing to. Just a little glazing, like some orange on the yellow. A little bit of red into this magenta. You could do like a partial glaze too, where you just glaze one area, but not the whole shape. So that's, you know, really up to you. But I think glazing for me is a fun thing to do because I learn a lot about color combinations and I learn about what the watercolor paint can do when it starts to layer and build and interact. But again, it just depends on the look you want to do. But I'm liking the extra bit of color. I think it's kind of fun. Too, if you're ever impatient with your watercolor, sometimes it's nice to have like a blow dryer on hand, and I'll just like blow dry, like not when it's soaking wet because you don't want it to like spread out all over your paper. But after, you know, it gets a little bit dry, you can blow dry it to finish the rest of the way if you're ever feeling impatient. Let's see. Sometimes it's fun to leave like a little border. Sometimes I'll fill the whole thing, go to the edge. You know, it's really whatever you like the look of. And it's fun to experiment. So just while that's kind of drying, I'll show you. This was from another class I did, but just to show you like a layout with some circles. Because you could easily do like floral patterns and designs like with something like this. And this was just a round brush wet on wet. That's all this was. And I just painted a little circle of water and then dropped in like reds, oranges, and magentas to get this effect. So, you know, just a different layout because really it's whatever you want to do. So I'm going to just pull this to the side for a second and let this dry. And just bring my first little paper back over because I just want to show some different ideas on here. because there's some different approaches, I think, with like putting in patterns and designs like on top of your art, things you can think about doing. Um, how do I want to zoom in? So again, you have a couple options. If you have any kind of extra pens, I mean, even if you've got Sharpies, ballpoint, a black ballpoint pen, a black gel pen, any kind of like dry material, I think works best for this. But otherwise, if you don't have that on hand at the moment, I'll just show you some brushes that work really well. And you could, if you get them really wet, you could do like black watercolor paint or gray watercolor paint, or even you could paint just different, you know, colors of line work over top. It just depends on the look you're going for. But just to give you an alternative idea, you can use paint brushes if you want to. I just tend to like to doodle with the pens themselves because I think it's more, it feels more like doodling to me at least. So I'm just gonna move my paints out of the way a minute. So like some of the different things in here, get out my other little notebook so I can show you. So like I did in here, like sometimes I'll do like little individual kind of floral patterns like per thing, or sometimes I'll like fill it up more of like a Zentangle idea. Whereas this one, I just kind of drew shapes over top. So like this little guy here, I might just take like my micron pen and just kind of start with just some like a loose shape like this. And then you could decide, do you want them connected? Which if I want them connected, I can just kind of have it loop like this and kind of come out and then bring this one over like this and just have it be kind of whimsical like that. And then what I'll do is maybe just kind of take my pen and divide up the lines a little bit more. So it's kind of like just putting in lines, and just drawing that way. You don't have to worry about drawing super duper realistic necessarily, although you could base this a little bit more on realism if that's something you're wanting to do. But even if you Google like floral patterns or floral doodles or floral Zentangles, tons of little ideas like this will pop up for you to kind of try. Something like up here, you could even, if this is one we want to try together, just zoom in a little bit more so you can see it better. So something like this, I might start off with like, you know, like a circle in the middle. And then I'll, you know, draw some like little lines coming out of it. Imagine like a little sun. We're starting like with a little sun, or it almost looks like the top of an apple kind of, doesn't it? Or the bottom of an apple or tomato right now at the moment. You know, and then maybe I'll just kind of add some little embellishments, you know, and then from here I think, okay, you know, maybe I could kind of draw some petals, right? And I could, you know, maybe I've got a petal here. And maybe I've got a petal here. And then from here, I can say, okay, you know, I could fill in a petal here. And then I can kind of fill in a petal here. And, you know, keep in mind, like flowers or anything found in nature, nothing is perfectly symmetrical, nothing's identical. There's all these slight little differences. So don't worry, like if your lines are totally perfectly the same, because it makes it look a little bit more flowy, a little bit more natural. And then, you know, like this was a little bit of a wider pen, so something I might try is taking a little bit of a thinner one and then just maybe adding some extra little lines in here. Just to kind of give it a little bit more detail. And this is something you don't have to do if you don't want to, but that's the whole part of doodling is kind of playing with lines, playing with shapes. I think doodling is a great way to practice drawing because it kind of plays on the symbol making that we get comfortable with, like our little classic sun and our little basic flower shapes. But it's a good thing because it allows you to not just play with shape, but manipulate the shape and add designs and textures and play with that. And then I think you can translate some of this stuff into some of more of your realistic work down the line. But yeah, just like something simple like that could be a little way to add a flower. Something like, just moving my shapes around. Even like something like this, like if you want to go super kind of loose and doodly, you can, like if you start off with like a shape, like a U shape like this. And then what I'll do is just kind of fill in and put another U on the inside. And then like another U on the inside of that. And then you can even do, you could do one skinny one or just even one more like super thin little U. And then, you know, maybe you add some like little embellishments to the top. You do some like little dots. Maybe I mimic that same little dot down here at the bottom. Yeah, I could give it a stem. You know, and then like maybe this one next to it could, let's start with like a little swirl. You could start with like a swirl on the top. And then, you know, maybe we'll give it some, put like a little kind of leaf shape on either side. And then we can just kind of fill it in with some more like little leaf shapes. Do one more right here. You know, and then maybe put some like little petals in it. Could give that a little stem. You know, you might do, could even kind of give it a shape first, like this. We could even put in another little swirl on this guy. Kind of layer it up a little bit, give it a different look. You know, and I'll just kind of add like little embellishments. It doesn't have to necessarily be like a super realistic looking flower necessarily when they're doodles. They can just kind of be based on reality, but you can kind of play around with them. Other things you could do, you know, like little leaf shapes can be kind of fun, like doing, you know, kind of maybe bring like a little bit of stem into it, kind of maybe round off the top. You know, you could even do like little lines. You could do some like polka dots on one side if you want it to be kind of fun and whimsical. You would also do more of a kind of pointed leaf shape where it's pointed at the top. And then give it like a little stem or something like that. You know, and then you could add some kind of different lines into it if you wanted to. Sometimes I'll even just take like a little cluster, like, you know, take a little area like this, and you could just kind of fill it in with like some little circles, almost like do some like little berries. Could even put like a little dot in there. Something like that can be kind of fun. Oh, this is even super duper simple, but can be really fun. Is just like a little line and then just like kind of little offshoots with like just like little dots on them. Sometimes what I like to do is do kind of simple flowers next to more advanced flowers. You can also let them kind of run off of the watercolor a little bit onto the paper. That can be kind of fun. And then just to show you kind of something different too, just for something else you can try. And this will kind of maybe be more like what mine looks like on my final, because I did a lot of these kind of shapes, but you can kind of draw within a shape too. So like an example might be, I'll do kind of like a almost ferny kind of leafy type plant. So I could have like a stem that comes off of that little watercolor, shape that I did. And then, maybe I'm just adding in kind of these different petal-y shapes, and I can kind of let them go off the page a little bit if I want to. I can let there be kind of a little gap, can play with those shapes. Maybe they get bigger as they go down. They could connect more if that's what you want them to be like. You could add in some like little lines. Just all little different things you can do. It's really about just kind of shape and line. I like to start with some basic lines and shapes, and then ask myself, okay, could I embellish this a little bit? Could I add something to it to kind of make it fun? And then just something else basic you can do that can be kind of fun is even just like a total, you could do like a full circle even, and have it be almost more less like natural floral and more kind of just like playing with shape, and have it be a little bit more geometric, where you're just kind of, maybe there's a swirl, maybe I'm just kind of dividing and just doing a bunch of lines to kind of divide up this space. And if the floral too just seems a little intimidating to you in the beginning, you can also just start with just regular lines, just very, very simple. Just kind of starting with some flowy lines like this, and even just putting like a little circle and just kind of very little petals like this. And you could just kind of try them at different heights. This can be really pretty, and you can just do kind of like a little row. And I even just don't even worry if they're perfect at all, In fact, sometimes the little imperfections are kind of charming and sweet. Make it look a little whimsical and expressive. So sometimes I'll just, do like little rows of flowers like this, where it's really just a simple line and some simple loose kind of circle and petal shapes. Just real, real simple. And then if you want to like take this to the next level and just advance it a little bit, you could even add some like little, little petals going up the stem, or sorry, little leaves. That's what I meant to say. Little leaves going up the stems, just to kind of give it a little something extra. But most any flower can be broken down into kind of a simplistic shape. So sometimes I'll even look at like flowers that I like, and I'll, kind of mimic them and doodle them that way. So hopefully that gives you some ideas for different ways you could doodle. Oh, I should show you this too, actually, before. Like this little vine I did. So if I paint like a shape like this, I could like fill in some like little leaf shapes first, maybe. And then I could even draw like a little vine going down here. Perhaps I want to add on some little extra offshoots or little kind of detailing, can make that kind of fun. Some different, lines going different ways. Yeah. So most of this is dry now. There's a couple areas where I glazed where it's still a little damp, but this is now, I would just kind of pick a spot and just kind of go for it, to be honest, is kind of how I like to start it. And maybe here, I'll just show you kind of some other like simple things you could do. This one's really simple. You could do like a line coming down. Let me zoom in a little bit. It's hard to see when I'm so far away, I think. Okay, so this is another really simple one, really simple. So it's just a line down, and then I could do like a line going out this way. So like a Y. So I basically make a Y. Then what I can do is on the top of the Ys, like basically I'm drawing like a little kind of roundish, but loose, kind of ovally roundish shape. And then I just fill that in. And then I'll do the same thing over here. And you can play with kind of which direction they go out, and I just kind of fill that in. So now I've got a Y shape where I've kind of filled in the ends. Then what I'll do is you can put like a little V, put a little V on the left side of the Y, and then do those same little ends. And basically you just kind of repeat this. And you can play around with the thicknesses, and you can play around with the, you know, shapes and the directions. But, you know, maybe this one only has one going off of it. You know, just if you want to create a different type of balance, that can be kind of fun. Or maybe you want it to be kind of diagonal, you know, where this kind of comes off this way and this goes out a little bit more this way. So you could kind of play with that shape too. Yeah, and just kind of fill it in. So that can be like a really super easy, whimsical little plant idea or doodle. Here's another one that's super simple. You just need like a line, just a kind of curved vertical line, a little bit of a curve. And then at the very top, we'll just draw like a little kind of egg shape with a point on the end, I guess you could say. And then what we'll do is we'll divide that in half, put a line, and then I'm just going to shade in the right-hand side. And then what I'm going to do actually is kind of repeat that little process, but this time I'm going to put them on both sides. So one on each side, but on this side will be dark, and then I can make this side dark. So they're kind of like it goes opposite. And then you can just repeat this process and just put some more of these little shapes down, and you can put them as close together as you want. Ooh, this pen. The one thing I will say is the micron pens, definitely you have to wait for your watercolor to be fully dry. Otherwise those micron pens don't want to work. Mine are a little upset with me. There we go. So I can do kind of the same thing where I'm dividing this guy in half. This shape got a little funky because my pen. Bring the dark side here. And then I can just repeat that again. And again, really as far down as you want to go. But that can be just kind of a fun little whimsical design. You could also do, I'm trying to see where areas are dry. I'll just turn it this way. We'll just have different edges. This can be kind of fun. You could do kind of like a straight line going up, and then kind of divide it into kind of like two leaf shapes. And then you can kind of add like one big leaf shape or flower shape in the middle, or you could kind of like divide this up if you want to, and kind of create like some little lines. This one got a little funky. And then sometimes like if something if a line messes up, you know, maybe I'll just add an extra line and sort of fix it to kind of create some balance. Or maybe I'll just kind of shade in an area because that can be nice too. And just to show you too, because this is dry. So well, actually, you know what? I can just show you on here that something like this, if I wanted to paint more colors on top to get like this kind of effect, now would be the time to do that because this is all dry. So if I wanted to paint other colors on here, I could do that. There's another kind of effect you can do if you kind of look at these, almost kind of like this idea. You could do like a splash of red next to a splash of green, next to a splash of green, and then do drawings of the flower on the red and then the leaves on the green. You know, imagine like taking this and scooching it up next to this sort of a thing. So that's another thing you can do too. And you can do that on top of existing colors, or you can do that like when you're laying out your page in general. Yeah, and some other fun things to do, you know, sometimes I'll even do like a little vase with a flower in it, can be kind of fun. Like if you wanted to do like a really simple like little vase, you could start with kind of like a little ellipse kind of shape, you know, and then maybe sort of bring it down, you know, any kind of vase container, whatever you want it to look like. I'll give it maybe a little rounded bottom, you know, and then maybe from here you could have some, this is a little wet, so my pen is not wanting to draw. But you know, you could kind of fill this in then with any type of flower you wanted. You know, sometimes I'll just kind of start with a center and then, you know, just put some kind of different petals in here. Give it some like little leaves. Again, I'll just kind of add some little line work. You know, then you could even kind of play with the vase. You know, just adding kind of some different lines and shapes. I mean, that can be fun too. It's just, you know, kind of an extension. You could even do like little cactuses. They can be kind of fun. And I'll do those I'll kind of take like little ovals and I'll just kind of like layer them. You could even have it be like in a little pot. You know, and you could kind of fill this in too in the background if you wanted. Just depends what you want it to look like. You could put like little, or this might be fun to use if you have a white pen to kind of bring that in there. So that can be kind of like a fun little extension to ferns, you know, and sometimes I'll even just kind of play around with shapes that mimic kind of floral shapes, but they're not actually like full flowers necessarily. So, you know, maybe I'll just kind of take some circles and just kind of create some little loose kind of shapes in that regard. You know, maybe I'll just kind of add some fun detailing to them. So they're not like anything, they're just kind of loose little designs. You know, and this can be kind of fun because then you can discover just other little, you know, ways to do things and fun things. So yeah. Zoom out. I'm not gonna finish all of mine because a couple of my areas, like this is still wet, that's still wet. You can see I actually smudged this with my hand a little bit when I was drawing one of these other ones, but that's okay. I mean, you get the idea of, just some of the different ways you can lay these out. Um, just some fun extensions too of things I've done. You can, like, if you have Mod Podge at home or Elmer's glue or gel medium, I've even like cut kind of loose shapes like this out and have glued them on things, have created like pop outs with them or embellishments. So it's like, it can be a fun thing to doodle, but it could also be kind of a technique that you craft with or make other art pieces with or something like that too. So but I think for me, it's just a fun way to be mindful. I find myself doing this most often if I'm like talking on the phone, to like a friend or something. I might just be sitting there painting and we're talking, and that can be kind of fun. I'm going to go ahead and switch my camera a minute so I can see everybody. But tell me, so what do you all think? How did you do?
It was like meditation.
It's like meditation. Absolutely.
It is, and I liked it. I saw it right away. Definitely the Zentangle part of it
Mm-hmm.
definitely could come in.
Yes,
This. I really
you
like.
can. Good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Good. I'm so glad. I like that the Zentangle connection. I think it could be fun to play around with like basic kind of lines and other patterns in addition to florals sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a fun way to create like a focal point where maybe your florals are sort of in the center, but then you have designs going around them somehow. Absolutely. So many extensions to this or ways you could approach it.
Mm-hmm.
How did you do, Carol?
Well, I think that was fun. It looks better than I thought it would.
Yeah, good. Good. It is fun. And truthfully, I don't know that these can turn out bad, to be honest with you, because it's, they just have a different look. And if you Google like floral ideas, you're going to find some that are really sketchy and loose, and then some that are very clean and crisp and controlled. So I think it's just a matter of finding what you think looks good and what makes you happy.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, would you find it enjoyable to kind of do, a similar class to this again, where we just kind of come together and we paint watercolor and kind of doodle together in more of a social kind of way?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. I will add that in. I do want to note, just since I see the three of you often, just my class schedule will be coming for the rest of August. I'm kind of waiting on my school district to tell me what's happening. And it's been very